we've gone back to feudalism, right? Where to some extent we're the serfs who are now basically, existing at the discretion of these larger platforms.
Now, we may disagree on this a little bit.
Calling the next grand bargain the Great Leap Sideways.
This is the podcast from hell.
Grand bargain.
Decolonizing aid.
COP26. Big aid.
Humanity.
Humanitarian action takes place at the edge of chaos. And to find the right answers, we need smart, honest conversations. That's what this podcast is about. Welcome to Humanitarian. I'm your host, Lars Peter Nissen.
Humanitarian. Humanitarian. Humanitarian.
We talk a lot about technology and its implications for humanitarian action on this show, and with good reason. Literally every aspect of the business has been transformed by information technology over the past decades. And today we can do things in real time. For example, communications, cash distributions, geospatial analysis that we could only dream of just decades ago. And when you think about how important information technology has become, it can seem right down mad that we continue to conduct a good chunk of our business on platforms that are controlled by a small number of very loosely regulated and massively powerful companies for whom we are much more of a commodity than a customer. That has profound implications for our work, in particular because we are dealing with highly vulnerable populations. That's the problem that today's guest has set out to change. Neil Smith is the founder of Alkemio, a tech startup that seeks to provide real alternatives to commercially driven collaborative platforms. The tagline is Safe Spaces for Collaboration, and it's a really interesting project. It's a big swing that Neil is taking. He is up against very powerful opponents, and there's no telling whether he will be successful. But no matter what, just the fact that Alkemio is beginning to question the dominance of the big companies and trying to get a foothold in a very difficult business is a truly inspiring example. We have previously dealt with the issue of the dependency on tech. In episode 76, The Technophobe, Pierrick de Vidal from ICRC laid out his analysis of how our ability to operate according to the humanitarian principles is being undermined by the way we use technology. If you haven't listened to the episode yet, you should check it out once you've listened to this one. If you like this episode, why don't you help us out by promoting the show? Send the link to a couple of colleagues, review us on whatever platform you're listening on, or send us an email with suggestions for episodes and comments on what we're doing. You can reach us on info@truehumanitarian.org. But most importantly, enjoy the conversation. Neil Smith, welcome to True Humanitarian.
Yeah, delighted to be here.
It's a lovely evening. We're in The Hague. We are sitting in a co-working space called The Hague Tech. And we have a bottle of wine, actually. You claim you have 2 bottles of wine, so it'll be, I'm sure, a long and interesting conversation.
It'll be a good evening.
Maybe for the listeners, just begin by explaining what is The Hague Tech?
Yeah, so The Hague Tech is as you said, a co-working space, but it's also a community of innovators, combining the usual startup type innovation companies in there, but also a good representation from public sector innovation bodies such as Duhi Campus that are trying to bridge the innovation from the startup world into the public sector in a effective and practical way. So it's quite a mixed community. It's a more balanced than your normal just startup co-working space.
So it's not just about money?
No. Public values play very strongly in here, for sure.
And you're the co-founder of something called Alkemio. What does Alkemio do?
Yeah, Alkemio. So first, it's a hard name. If you struggle to remember it, it's actually Esperanto for alchemy. And the idea is to be able to take the raw ingredients of society in terms of our willingness to collaborate, our talent to collaborate, and trust in each other to collaborate and make something valuable out of it. So what Alkemio is trying to do is trying to make it much easier to work together. We offer safe spaces for collaboration, and that is a digital platform to create essentially online environments where you can work with each other safely, and backed by an organization that's designed to be safe and trustable. So that working to serve the purpose, serving societal values as opposed to shareholders' profit maximization interests.
So it sounds nice, but unpack that a bit for us. What does that actually mean?
So Alkemio was founded from with the purpose to help society work better together. Right? And the conviction is that, unless we can fundamentally improve our ability to work together to address the challenges that we face, we're going to struggle. So if people are familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, unless we can really make progress on SDG 17, we're going to struggle with SDGs 1 to 16. And Alkemio is...
I'm sure all of our audience is very familiar with all of the SDGs, but just remind me, number 17, what is it?
So 17 is basically structures for collaboration, societal structures for collaboration. And, you can try and translate that more broadly into our ability to collaborate. How do we effectively trust each other in any given scenario to work better together?
And of course, when you say structures to collaborate, I'm saying Slack and Teams and Google Office Suite. And do we really need another one?
No, if I'm talking about legal, I'm talking about the sort of, if you like, the societal norms. I'm talking about, the UN. I'm talking about legal frameworks. There are societal structures to collaborate. What you referred to there, I call them digital tools, digital platforms, etc.
But Alkemio is a digital platform.
Alkemio is absolutely a digital platform, yeah. But with the mission to help society collaborate. So what makes Alkemio different? Alkemio is offering you safe spaces for collaboration. The idea is that you can create a digital space where you can define the topic you want to make change on together. And around that change, you create the people, gather the people in organizations who want to make that change with you. Yes, you can create subspaces for subgroups inside that group. But fundamentally, the attention point is different. The attention point is that change, and around that you have the contributors, as opposed to, if you look at the Slacks of this world or other sort of messaging, you tend to have a lot of different basic communication channels beside each other. And any notion of actually what is the change as being the central point. What is the purpose you're trying to achieve? Alkemio then offers these safe spaces.
But why is Reddit unsafe?
Yeah, so you can have a good conversation on Reddit. Obviously, they have all obligations to moderate the content into it. But fundamentally, they are a commercial party. They are there to make profit. That is their mission. That is their purpose.
But they offer a beautiful product. Why is it unsafe?
You simply cannot know what is happening with your data in a structured way, because their business model essentially is you are the product in many ways on those things. And who decides what algorithms or what content you're being served in terms of what, to get your attention, right? Because if you're trying to maximize someone's attention, you maximize for outrage or the strong emotions, etc. It has the side effects, which we've seen around social cohesion and polarization in society. So you have their drivers, essentially, which is profit maximization, is not aligned with the wider societal benefit of actually having people work better together. And I would also argue, if I may, in that one, that it's also it's almost think of a particular situation you want. Say you want to drive water quality in a particular refugee context, right? How do you go about it? Do you set up a Reddit group, Slack group, WhatsApp, Facebook? Facebook. Okay.
I'm old school.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. It's very well trodden. It's very well known. And that's a huge advantage, right? People know understand it in Facebook and access it.
And they're already on it, so you don't have to drive them to a new channel. Yeah. There's no friction.
Exactly. So there's a low friction element to it, which makes it easy, right, to get going. But it brings three problems, I would say, with that. One is that you're not going to be as effective as I think you could be on a platform that's designed to help you achieve change together with best practices and knowledge and set up to help you achieve that change.
So you provide content specifically to achieve change?
Absolutely.
So it's not just a platform.
It's not just functionality. It's also knowledge as well as integration of AI. So that's one, right? So it's basically trying to make you be more effective in achieving your change.
Second, it's a huge task, though.
Oh, absolutely. But the second thing that it'll bring is that, you sort of right now, if you go on Facebook, there's someone who's on WhatsApp probably good, but if someone's on Reddit, you're at different silos, right? There's different groups. So you actually because people tend to go into different walled gardens, and Facebook will actually protect their walled garden, right? It's not in their interest to allow you to connect to other people out in other walled gardens. And the third thing, of course, you are the product if you're on Facebook, right? So, okay. So
but the walled garden bit, Neil, aren't you just creating your own walled garden? I don't get the difference.
So that ties back to the organization behind Alkemio. So yes, you could see us at some point as being our own walled garden. But Alkemio is in some sense giving it away, right? In the sense that, we are not out there to maximize our profit. We're out there to maximize our impact.
So if I get fed up with Alkemio and I want to export all my data to Facebook, I can do that.
So stronger even, you can even run your own version of Alkemio. Alkemio is fully open source. You can run your own version of it. You can download all the data and content and upload it to your own version. The idea is to take away the barriers to someone sort of doing it. And of course, we hope people use the commercially hosted Alkemio service to make sure Alkemio is viable and to get the network effect kicking in. But fundamentally, our guarantee into the market is that, we're fully open source. You can run it yourself. You can take all your data. Data is yours. It's not ours. There's no hidden algorithms, et cetera, into it. And, if you look at us as an organization with the mission to help society collaborate, then, our driver is to help connect across the silos. There's way too much duplication going on. People are reinventing the wheel left, right, and center. And also, and even a more significant unlock of value is that how do you connect in and unlock the talent of society to contribute to these challenges? Because it's simply at the moment, very, very hard to know where you can connect into if you have a certain amount of hours and talent into it. So there's, if you can get a collaboration platform in play where people trust and are willing to actually work on top of and to build on top of, then I think we can actually take all of society's ability to collaborate up a level.
So tell me, how is Alkemio governed?
We started off life as a foundation, and that was in 2020. And after about, 2 years of the journey, it became very apparent that if we can achieve the goals we set out to achieve, then the actual amount of value that would be unlocked would be staggering. I mean, think of any of the massive social networks.
So you expect to be very rich very soon?
Absolutely not. And that's an explicit choice. I mean, I am actually an entrepreneur. I've had to scale ups. I've been busy with startups. So I have a luxury position. But if you're trying to achieve massive scale change, then you have to also make it safe for everybody to come on board and support that journey. So we came to the conclusion that Alkemio could be a huge value unlock. And then how do you protect that value? If you have a lot of value, then you also have a lot of things to fight about. And I was introduced, thanks to a friend of mine, to the concept of steward ownership in, I think, early 22. And immediately it just resonated straight up. And so we adopted that as a legal form and put all of that information also out into the public so people can copy our approach. But probably good from your audience to also explain a little bit about what steward ownership means. So steward ownership is essentially about putting purpose before profit. There's two key principles in there. One is that the purpose, essentially in our case, cannot be compromised. Alkemio cannot be purchased. Yes, we can take capital in, but if anybody puts capital into Alkemio, then they do not buy any voting rights. They just get economic interests into it. So you have a really basically very strong lock on the purpose. And the second is that you allow people to have an economic upside from the venture, but in a way that's capped, which means that if someone puts, say, €100 in, they might have a right to, say, €350 back at some point in the future in dividends. But it's capped, which means that if you particularly have achieved this huge, hopefully, societal value unlock, that will be huge. The value that's over after paying back those investors actually goes to the foundation above to allocate out in line with the mission of Alkemio. So it's a very different model.
So it sounds to me like what OpenAI should have been.
Should have been, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, very well put. There, essentially, that lock on value was, in hindsight, quite weak. We've got a structure whereby there's Alkemio Holding, and then we have our own foundation above it, Alkemio Foundation with stewards. But we also have an independent foundation where we have no control over that foundation. And that foundation has a veto right against pretty much all of the significant decisions you can take as a venture, such as selling it or such as, awarding big salaries to people, etc. And, steward ownership, it's very much a growing concept, particularly in Europe. There's a very strong organization in Germany called Purpose Economy that drives it. Denmark has historically had a very strong lead presence in this area, and Holland also has a very rapidly growing community. We are stewards, being one of the key players in that space. And, it actually, what it allows you to do is very much align the interests of all stakeholders around the venture and not just the interests of shareholders.
So I'm sure most people listening to this are familiar with the concept of a B Corp.
Mm-hmm.
How is steward ownership different from a B Corp?
Yeah, so first, all credit to B Corp. B Corp is a super movement, super development. It allows people to actually really, show that they're trying to do the right thing. But a B Corp, fundamentally, the shareholders are still in charge, right? As they have decided that doing good is actually part of their way of maximizing their shareholder value. But it can be changed, right? So in some ways, it's a temporary thing. In the case of Alkemio, if I turned around tomorrow and said that I wanted to, together with the other steward, to be able to actually, sell Alkemio to say Microsoft, we simply cannot do it. We would have to convince an independent foundation with quite a large set of stakeholders behind it that, this particular transaction is good for the overall mission of the foundation, which I don't think it would be.
So you hired some lawyers to basically say no if you want to pull an Elon Musk.
It's not even lawyer. It's actually a fundamental. It's an approach. It's a pattern. I say there's some wonderful case studies out there by Purpose Economy in particular to try and inspire it. And there's some very well-known companies too. I mean, ones you mightn't think about. Carlsberg is actually steward-owned. Bosch, Odin. There's some quite well-known names out there. And in the case of Alkemio, that was the steward ownership gave me, if you like, and the other people around Alkemio, the solution to three hard problems. One was, how can you really guarantee the purpose in a way that everyone in the market, anyone interacting with you knows that this cannot be changed? Second, we still have to raise capital. We are a startup scale up. We will need capital. We need, I want more, always more, you want to grow faster. But thirdly, how do you then also ensure that people who are contributing to that mission can do good and do well? And it's often a false dichotomy that, people actually, come out of college and do you want to go and work in a legal firm and earn lots of money, or do you want to go work in an NGO and, do lots of good? And I think that actually can be a middle ground whereby you can do a lot of good and, and do well. You're not going to get rich. You're not going to buy a boat. So you should be able to get enough of a jump on life to buy a house and get your family raised, etc.
Great. So we've spoken about how Alkemio is governed, how we make sure that once it becomes hugely successful, of course, once it becomes the next unicorn,
Well, the unicorn is determined by market value, so we will always have a little bit lower market value. But
you'll still have the value. You just can't get it out for yourself.
You'll still be unlocking the value, but our mission is to help society collaborate better together, and it could be that somewhere along the journey to helping society work better together, actually we reduce prices, right? Because you want to make sure you have a viable business. That's absolutely critical. So you actually sustain enough capital to grow and actually have a viable enterprise. But ultimately, that whole enterprise is there to serve the purpose, not to serve shareholders.
A collaborative unicorn.
You could, certainly, the value unlocked can be much, much, much bigger, just not in terms of shareholder value.
That's all cool, but how do you get venture capitalists to invest in this?
It is definitely a challenge. If people ask me about, so we're 1 year underway now with steward ownership. Essentially, I refused to take in any external capital until we had actually this structure in place to keep it clean. And I tend to say steward ownership is brilliant for the market, for your position in the market. It's brilliant for your staff, the people who are basically contributing towards the journey. But it's a strange beast for the venture capitalist or investor world. We have found a set of angel investors who have fairly strong trust in key people in Alkemio who are willing to say, well, listen, we think the return is still pretty decent, right, economically, and not a difference. It's not your normal investment, but we think actually it's a good structure and we're willing to support it. But to do that at scale requires someone who's willing to take a bit of a step into a different funding pattern, and that is a challenge. There's no ways of hiding about it. And we see it as part of our journey to also, try to show that it is possible to do a successful steward ownership venture at scale. So it's a little bit of a harder path, but I think a more worthwhile one.
Neil, give me a sense of how much money is needed to do something like this. How much have you been able to raise? You don't need to give me the exact figures, but more or less. Yeah. And how much would you love to have?
So I'd love to have. That's a good question. So you're playing a big game, right? You're playing a game where you're trying to put a digital platform into play that is competing with some extremely well-resourced players in the marketplace. And you're not talking about changing a local neighborhood. You're talking about changing fundamentally how society collaborates. And I'll come on to maybe what Alkemio is trying to achieve in a bit. And you don't do that with a few euros, right? If you play a big ticket game, you have to play big tickets. So I'm in a luxury position. I've had a good entrepreneurial journeys in the past, and other people around me, particularly my brother, has also had done some good work and has some financial freedom from it. So between me and my brother, we've put I think over $1 million by now into Alkemio. It's serious capital. We've also raised, not quite in that order, but not far, in that sort of scale from external investors as well. We've also managed to get support from partners and subsidies along the journey as well, on sort of a good level, not far off that as well. So it's a serious game you're playing in, and you need serious capital, and that's to bring the journey to the level as it were now, where we believe we've sketched enough of the vision and have some good traction in the marketplace. My biggest frustration by a country mile is that this is a 15-16 person organization. That and I can carry a certain amount of financial risk, but I can't take it faster than this, not without being fair to my family. But this should be a 50-60 person organization, and I need much more capital to scale to that, because you're playing in a big game, and people expect very good ease of use, scalability, performance, and all that. Ultimately we just need to go a lot faster.
So you and your brother threw in $1 million, you raised $1 million, and you need another 5-6 at least.
And the fun part is of the steward ownership structure is that you're no longer selling in control, right? So whether you raise 1 million, 2 million, or 10 million doesn't actually matter. You're essentially selling an entitlement to future dividends, not control over the venture. The control of the venture is held by stewards. So it's a very different proposition into the market.
It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of advantages to this structure that people maybe don't fully understand, which is that, because you've separated control and economic interests so completely, you actually make the economic interests more tradable. Because you could actually imagine you sell that right to future dividends into some kind of secondary market, which for people to put investment in, it actually becomes more liquid in some sense. We do everything as transparent as we possibly can. Everything about our journey is up online. We love people to copy us. I'd love to inspire others to go down this path. I sometimes use the analogy that if a normal startup venture capital journey, it's a 10-lane highway going off that direction, right? You got service stops, you got people to help you. It's everyone understands it. This is how you do it. We were basically taking a little side path off into the woods, right? Some wonderful people who've given guidance and inspiration along the way. People from Your Stewards, Kaisbert Gorin, people from Purpose Foundation, some superb lawyers as well. But it's very much a non-trodden path. And that path needs to become much, much, much wider if we're really going to unlock the potential for society to innovate, to address a lot of the challenges that we face.
I hear what you're saying, Neil, that there is a risk in giving your data for free to a company that basically sees you as the commodity rather than the customer. I get that. But at the same time, we do that. We're not afraid. We trust them implicitly. We happily throw all our data at them. And I think the only person I've really heard, at least in a humanitarian context, formulate this as a massive problem was Pierrick de Vidal from ICC, who was on the show some months ago, and he talked about how neutrality is actually undermined and independence is undermined by us choosing tech platforms that are actively involved in one side or the other in a conflict. Microsoft helping the Ukrainian government evacuate their data to the cloud, for example.
So first of all, super podcast, really enjoyed it. The phrase from that podcast that really stuck with me was how he said essentially, we are hostage to the power of these large platforms. And I think on a micro level where you make an individual decision, then I think it makes complete sense. You get a lot of functionality for free and you get to, get effective access to functionality. The problem comes at the macro level, right? Whereby essentially their interests ends up actually polarizing society and driving society more, into bubbles as opposed to bringing people together. And maybe one other point into that is that to some level, yes, Facebook, just using them as one example, is safe or trustable, for an individual consumer. But it's good to remember that, your account and your profile on that platform exists at their discretion, right? They can turn you off. And, there's a very interesting development now in the US, initiative called Project Liberty by a sort of a well-known US entrepreneur, Frank McCourt. And he puts it quite eloquently. He says, we've gone back to feudalism, right? Where to some extent we're the serfs who are now basically, existing at the discretion of these larger platforms.
Okay, I get the building on sand bit. I get that. But I would argue, or I could argue, but wouldn't you say that the level of collaboration we have today because of these platforms is much greater than it was 3 decades ago? I mean, there's no comparison. And so it's a net positive. Okay, there are externalities, and yes, we get in slightly more fights than we used to, but damn, we can collaborate. And Alkemio is not as well known as these ones, right? So how are you increasing collaboration?
So I'll address the first part of that. If you look at, we're certainly communicating a lot more. I definitely would say we're communicating a hell of a lot more. But whether we're actually collaborating is an open question. If you look at it, just take the existing sort of situation in America or even within Europe, we're much more polarized. Our ability to have fact-based, coherent discussions, some would argue, has actually gone down over the last 20 years and not up.
Well, but you could also argue that LGBTQ plus people collaborate more. There's a lot of stories about teens uncertain about these things, finding a community online. And you could make the same argument with neo-Nazis who are finding themselves.
Oh, yeah, any technology can be used for good or bad. And there's, without doubt, there's been huge value and positive value unlocked by digitalization of society. However, we have to realize that, in at least my conviction, to put it modestly, is that, we are now a digital society, right? We rely on digital tools for more and more for interaction. But I find it quite bizarre that, these are basically the foundational elements for our society right now. And they don't have our interests in there. We're basically building a house whereby someone else controls the plumbing and water supply and actually even how the rooms are connected, right? You would never do that as a sane society. But we've sort of allowed that to happen and are now sort of dealing with some of the consequences of it. And, however powerful the digitalization wave has been to date, that's going to become even more powerful with what's coming now with generative AI. I mean, that technology is truly incredible and truly terrifying.
Yeah, true that.
Yeah. So, and unless we can get to a digital future whereby actually the digital foundations in which we stand upon have public interests embedded in them, I think we're heading for a very dangerous future. And that, in some lenses, is the fundamental mission of Alkemio. How do we enable a digital platform putting societal interests first to be the base on which we collaborate?
Describe the community that is on Alkemio today.
Okay. Yeah. So in the early phase of Alkemio, we had a lot of people who believed in the vision which we were trying to achieve. The platform I would now call a young adult. It has a lot of functionality, but there's still some rough edges to it.
We call them pimply teenagers.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's not a polished, suave, 28-year-old going off, in a suit or something. But it's, we have our strongest footprint right now is in the public sector in Holland, the City of The Hague, the Dutch Association of Cities, parties like that who believe in basically the importance of actually having a digital platform to, first of all, connect multiple stakeholders around a particular problem, as well as actually be able to trust the digital platform that they're standing on. So that actually they can, we're not being unfair in the marketplace. And we also now have a growing footprint in education. We've had a super collaboration over the last nearly year now with Amsterdam University, Free University Amsterdam. And there, for example, they're looking to also, again, trying to protect the students' information from actually just giving it away to Google or Microsoft or Miro or something like that. So this is all talking about, the strategic level sort of advantages. But we also believe that the platform itself actually offers we think, a much more effective way to do collaboration, because all of the interaction happens around the change you're trying to achieve, and all the people exist around the change you're trying to achieve. And then we try to guide people on that journey to achieve their goals with a combination of things like discussion groups, like you get in Slack, with whiteboards, like you get in Miro, with collection of links, like maybe you get in some kind of browser saving setup. But all of those tools are all basically subservient or being used in the context of that wider change you're trying to achieve, and then bundle it up into a library so people can reshare knowledge.
So I guess the way I truly feel about it, I think you could probably match the functionality of all of the commercial platforms.
With enough time and with enough resources.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're there. I haven't really worked on Alkemio, but
we're trying to sketch the vision, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people who work with us now still basically have to work a little bit harder than maybe they would in other ones, but they also get, I say, a much more dedicated and more guided process on the platform than you would get. Because, you come back to my earlier point, if you try to use your own ad hoc collection of tools to achieve change, you're having to do your own integration across those different tools, right? You might have somebody in Slack, somebody in Miro, and they're on that team, so not on that teams, etc. And we're saying, well, here's a collective environment, neutral between all of you, which actually has all the pieces we think that's needed. Yes, of course, this piece is missing and it could be better, but fundamentally it's a different pattern, and we think that pattern is a fundamentally stronger pattern than the current way of doing it.
I guess it's the community that's your selling point, not the functionality, because I don't think you have the edge there yet.
No, I mean,
we're
playing table stakes in terms of being able to have whiteboards for multi-user collaboration or discussion groups. It's the different pattern of actually the different attention point makes us fundamentally different. And of course, the fact that the platform itself has a very different organizational focus.
What does scaling look like in that world? What makes you scale? Because one thing is that you do a better functionality on the whiteboard, but is that really what drives the scaling? I don't think so.
No, I mean, correct. I mean, functionality is never going to do the scaling. If you want to really kickstart the network effect, whereby basically each individual person joining the network gets more value because the network gets bigger, etc., then you want to have you face the cold start problem. How do you get the network effect to be big enough? In our case, that particular cold start solution, and the classic way to address that one is you create a tool that people want to use, and then more people use the tool and you get the network effect. In our case, that tool is a space. People right now are struggling to find an environment to work effectively together. They move that community onto Alkemio, they create a space. Oh, and hey, there's another space over there. And there's another space over there, another space. So you basically bootstrap the overall network effect by making each individual space better for those communities. And then they get the secondary benefit where the real value unlock happens, where actually the network effect kicks in.
So you get on Alkemio, you start your party, and once you started your party, you see that there's an even better party over in the corner, and you join that one, and you join. That's the scaling.
Or you find the right people to help you, or you find that someone has put up some kind of knowledge and best practice in the library that you can learn from and leverage from, so there's many benefits to network effect
What's your success story? What's the collaboration you're proudest of?
The one we probably enjoy the most, is probably the strongest way of putting it, is the collaboration last year with the university. That one came in through a bit of a side door. We weren't actually even focusing on education. And someone said to, hey, I know someone who doesn't want to use Miro for the students' data, et cetera, et cetera. And the platform was probably a little bit immature for the course at that point, but very, very, very cooperative, daring professor. She set up 130 graduate students on the course. They worked on 20 different societal challenges, involved stakeholders in. She could set up her whole basically flow of the course with all the activities and whiteboards, etc., in one time as a template and go. And her comment in the course was that actually this was if I'd known what this could do, I could have done a better course. The best compliment you can get. But the energy for us from that course as an organization was fantastic, because you had basically someone really pulling at what you're trying to achieve, and driven from the values that we're trying to put into the marketplace, was that you actually can trust what happens with your data on this particular digital platform.
And what's the business model then? I mean, you managed to get some venture capitalists to invest. You've thrown some of your own money in. And does this professor then pay you? Or where do you get money?
So in that particular case, that was basically a very low cost pilot. So that's not where the money is. Fundamentally, our business model is people pay for spaces, and you get a free space, certain number of users, certain amount of functionality. You get a plus space, certain amount of users, certain amount of functionality. Basically, freemium model. Exactly. So you basically, and you play this forward at scale, and then actually the revenue becomes very, very, very significant. That's basically a simple model that we have. We are having to, continually rethink it through, because obviously whatever we're doing, we're trying to do in the light of how do we best, achieve our mission of helping society collaborate better. So, and if we find that some other model is better in the future for that, then we will adjust it.
If you have to sort of, who are you in another industry or in another? Are you what Wikipedia? Are you Carlsberg? Are you what? I mean,
yeah.
What are you?
It's an interesting question. What is Alkemio? if you look at, say, something like Linux, when it came in, everybody thought that there was no competition possible in the operating system market. You had IBM, you had Microsoft. It was completely locked down. They came in with a radically different model.
And a very cute logo.
Very cute logo. Indeed. And, essentially, in their case, there was no sustainable business model around Linux. We're trying to combine that aspect in as well. But fundamentally, they disrupted the whole industry by actually having playing a different game. And, I got some very good advice at the start of Alkemio's journey, something I won't mention here, and his model that, if you really want to make this vision fly, then you need to be much more Tim Berners-Lee than Mark Andreessen. So for people who aren't familiar with the web, Mark Andreessen was the commercial person behind Netscape and all that kind of stuff that was highly commercial. And Tim Berners-Lee was the person who basically invented the World Wide Web and ultimately was the largest source of unlock of value. Essentially World Wide Web took off because he essentially gave it away. And you want to essentially give it away to allow it to be easy for everyone else to adopt. And we're also trying to drive the network effect and make sure we're a sustainable business in a way where people actually still trust us as an organization. Our mission is to help collaboration, but collaboration is always important but never urgent. That's my experience on it. People go, "Oh, wonderful, a better way to do collaboration," but next year's budget to some level. Of course, there's always exceptions to that. And we've been very lucky along our way. We also understand the potential of AI, particularly with LLM stuff that's come along board last year. So we've actually, over the last 6 months, done quite a strong, pivot is maybe a strong word for it, but to integrate basically AI into our story as well, whereby we're trying to also make it possible to use AI in a safe way. Again, that word safe, safety, because you need ultimately to bring the power of this wonderful new technology into our collaborations, but in a way that's controlled and safe.
So we have spoken about the community you're trying to build around Alkemio and the other party that you can join that makes it more attractive and all of this stuff. Does AI replace that? Or how does AI play in there?
Yeah, good question. So first, I acknowledge that AI has staggering potential. Its ability to do jobs that we thought only humans can do, right? Or to summarize or write or to digest information. But it is also a Cambrian explosion right now, right? There's so many different versions of A, B, and C types of functionality coming out, and the same, if you like, game that was with the first version of the social networks is playing out there too, right? They're essentially after your data after this to try and get their own basic competitive advantage in the marketplace to benefit the shareholders. And so what role can Alkemio play in that world is so the question we asked ourselves, and we think we can also basically allow AI to be used safely. Or we have a concept we call virtual contributors in the platform, and a virtual contributor is essentially a safety layer around an AI service. You can create your own. We can have a Lars Peter AI, and you can put all of your knowledge in there. And then I can come along with my particular space and collaboration. I can say, "Hey, I want Lars Peter. I want you to, I look at your profile and say, well, it doesn't train with my data. It's backed by ACOP, so I can trust them, and has this kind of bias profile. That's an AI I want to use, and I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to invite you to join my space, and you have the option to accept or not." Right? So, by that way, you sort of bring AI in a safe way. You control what AI I have in your space, and also means that within my space I could have multiple. So I could have multiple AIs going into there.
So the backend would still be a large language model?
Backend is still a large language model.
Trained on some specific data?
Yes, and we try to give them transparency.
Okay, and then if I do that, if I do my Lars Peter AI, you then check me and say, "Oh yeah, this guy is cool enough," or "he is actually a neo-Nazi in disguise." Or what do you do?
So the question is, what role should we play in that game? We should not be judge or jury. We should be neutral and facilitating. Is my very strong conviction. So if you want to be the neutral and facilitating party, then you have to rely on others essentially to give the accreditation.
So I have to show people how I trained my specific AI, and then they choose whether to pick me no matter who I am?
I expect this is a market that will evolve. You think of like movie ratings, right? At some point, people adopted a standardized settings of movie ratings. I expect that there will be a strong push in the marketplace to give people certifications essentially around the AI and what it does with your data.
If I'm in a legal space and I'm not getting dragged into court for what I'm doing and saying, it's up to the users whether they like me or not.
Yeah, so what what we're aiming for is that there is if you like, a whole store on Alkemio whereby you maybe see 10,000, whatever number of virtual contributors in there. You can maybe put a filter up, show me only ones that are accredited by the UN or something like that, or some other body that you trust. And then you say, well, I like that one for legal advice. I like that one for HR advice. I like that one for community building advice. I'm going to invite those ones into my space. And then whatever terms and conditions associated with them, I accept. And then I have those, if they allow me to use it, then at that point, those virtual contributors become just like a user or an organization, part of that community around the space.
And so those terms could also be financial. So if you want to invite me in, it costs you so and so much.
That's one of the topics. Yeah, I expect so. We're trying to work that one out literally at the moment. It's a new market we're trying to create.
An app store for AIs.
You could see it that way. Yeah. With also quite a strong, if you like, trust and transparency set of demands around it, because everyone sees the power, but also a lot of people are afraid as well of what they can mean. So how do you allow people to safely interact with AI in a way that ultimately unlocks that power for use in collaboration? Because quite frankly, right now, I don't know how you use AI. When I use AI right now, I open up a browser, another tab, another tab, another tab, and then I may be using 3 or 4 different AIs, and that's all one-on-one, me using the AI. Whereas you bring them in this way, it becomes many to many, right? So you basically could invite 3 or 4 different AIs. You give them some, access to data in the space, your choice. You give them some role in your space, your choice. And you say, you either interact with them, asking them questions, maybe let's give them agency, do something on a regular basis in this space. So how do you allow those AIs to act like any other contributor into a space, whereby you control what role they have, what data they can access, etc., to unlock that power to really accelerate our collaboration?
I like what you're doing, but you're up against some humongous, powerful actors.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a snowball's chance in hell?
I have to believe yes. No one ever does an entrepreneurial journey unless they're an optimist. And the second thing is, how should I put it? I sometimes say to people that even if we have a 1% chance of pulling this off, that's a chance worth taking. I mean, I had the option after the entrepreneurial journey I've had to sort of relax and chill a bit. I did that for a few years, giving lots of advice. But at some point, it was so obvious to me what was needed in the marketplace in terms of a digital platform serving society for collaboration. I felt the obligation to go for it. And there's a lot of people who basically also understand that need. So basically our challenge at the moment, our mission at the moment is to build a community around Alkemio, right? Who believes this is possible, who believes that, with enough, the best talents and input and energy, that we can do something that actually can be a credible alternative, because we have a limited window to make the change we have to make, and we have to inspire more people that it is possible to make the change we have to make. And right now, there really is a lot of what I would call digital resignation at the moment out there, that a little bit like the question you just asked me, right? Do we have a snowball's chance in hell? These big companies are so powerful. But, you have to come with a different story, a different approach. And if we were coming at Alkemio from the standard startup venture approach, the answer is an absolute resounding no. No chance in hell, right? But with the approach we've chosen with steward ownership, we actually have an unfair competitive advantage in the marketplace, right? Because parties will put their communities and data onto Alkemio because they trust the organization. And if someone wants to copy us and also adopt the same model, but then we win too. Great. I mean, it doesn't have to be Alkemio that's basically the person that drives this change and puts public interest into our digital foundations. It's just that we have to get public interests into our digital foundations. So if someone copies us, the better job. Fantastic, right? Mission done.
Neil, fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. I have only one complaint. We have 2 bottles of wine, and we're not even through the first one.
Well, we can continue talking.
So I wish you all of the best of luck with Alkemio. I think it's a fantastic idea, and it is a very bold and brave crack at a massive, massive problem. Namely, that the most powerful companies we have in the world today are basically the cat food industry. They produce a product that's not for the cat, but for the little old lady with blue hair. Mm-hmm. And that's not sustainable.
No, and I think we really have to make a very fundamental choice. But what kind of future we want to have? Do we want to be serfs operating some kind of digital feudalism where the power is elsewhere, or do we want to take back control ourselves and to basically also find new ways how we collaborate? I think there's a lot of top ground to be explored there, but we have a choice, and we have to make that choice.
I'm a huge fan, and thank you for coming on Humanitarian.
It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
It's about the rights and the freedom to be, for people to choose their path in life and dream. Souls of men beyond what you see. Stages are different for each who will lead. Cycles of outsiders that get fat checks, fly in, fly out of places with slums and jets. Ask better questions, pick apart, educate, and no one is safe. We're here to build and debate. We are searching for more. Open up your mind beyond rich or poor. For the truth, you've been warned. Humanitarian.